I keep a travel journal. I always have. Not for anyone else, just for me. Dates, places, what I ate, what the light looked like, little notes about the people we met. I stopped writing in it on the fourth day in Georgia. I haven't written in it since. My name is Adam. I'm 29 years old. I've been backpacking through Europe and Central Asia, on and off, since my mid-20s, and I have been to some strange and remote places in that time. I have never been afraid of them. I was the kind of person who sought them out. I want to tell you about a monastery on a mountain in the Caucasus, and the rule the monks gave us when we arrived, and what happened when my friend Tom decided that rules like that weren't meant for him. I want to tell you because I still have the camera, and I still can't explain what's in the photographs. Tom was 31. We'd met at university and stayed close in the way that only happens when two people travel the same way. Light, flexible, always willing to change the plan. He was the one who found things nobody else knew about. Not tourist attractions, not landmarks, places, a guest house above the clouds in northern Armenia, a salt lake in Iran that turned pink at sunset. He had a sense for the world that I've never seen in anyone else before or since. Eli was 26. He'd come into our orbit 2 years earlier, a mutual friend who'd invited himself along on a trip to Romania and never really left. He was the kind of person who made difficult things feel lighter. Long border crossings, bad weather, nights when the plan fell apart. Eli always found something funny about it. He was good to have around. The three of us had been on the road for 5 weeks when we came to Georgia. Tbilisi, first, a beautiful, strange city that felt like 3 different places stacked on top of each other, and then east, then north, into the mountains. Tom had read about a region called Caucasus, wine country, old churches cut into cliff faces, monasteries that had been standing since the 5th century. He wanted to see one in particular. A complex on a mountainside about 2 hours from the nearest town, accessible by a rough road that most rental cars couldn't handle. He'd found a guest house nearby, a family who hosted backpackers. He'd messaged ahead in broken Georgian and gotten a reply that said, "Yes, we have rooms. Come." I said it sounded incredible. Eli said he was in as long as there was food. Tom was already planning the route. I wrote it all down in my journal, the date, the plan, the name of the family. I was excited. I want you to know that. We all were. The family who ran the guest house were called the Baridzes, a husband and wife in their 60s and a teenage grandson who translated when his grandparents' limited English ran out. They were warm and generous in that way that some rural hospitality is not performed, just genuine. The grandmother put food on the table before we'd finished unloading our bags. The monastery was visible from the guest house garden, high above us on the mountain, pale stone against the rock face, old enough that it looked like it had grown there rather than been built. There were monks still in residence, a small community, the grandson told us. They came down to the village occasionally for supplies. They didn't usually speak to tourists. Tom wanted to visit the next morning. The grandson spoke to his grandmother. She spoke back at length. He listened, nodded, and turned to us. He said, "You can visit in the day. The monks will let you walk the grounds, see the church. But there is a rule. You must leave before sunset. You must not be on the mountain after dark." Tom asked why. The grandson translated again. The grandmother answered. He looked at us and said, "She says the monastery is old. The monks say there are things on the mountain at night that have been there longer than the monastery. They do not explain more than that. It is just the rule." Tom nodded politely. I wrote it in my journal, word for word. Eli poured himself more wine and said, "Fair enough." We went up the next afternoon, the 3 of us. The path was steep and uneven, cut into the mountainside, with the valley dropping away below us as we climbed. The monastery, when we reached it, was extraordinary ancient archways, carved stonework, a church so dark inside that it took a full minute for our eyes to adjust, candles everywhere, the smell of incense and cold stone, and something underneath that I couldn't name. One of the monks passed us in the courtyard, an older man, white-bearded, moving slowly. He looked at each of us as he passed. When his eyes landed on Tom, he stopped. Just for a second. He looked at him for a moment, longer than felt natural, not unfriendly, but searching, like he was looking for something specific. Then he moved on, without a word. Tom didn't mention it. I did, later, on the way down. He shrugged, said the old man probably looked at everyone that way. We were back at the guest house well before sunset. We ate, drank, slept. Everything was fine. It was the third night that changed everything. I woke at some point, in the early hours, to the sound of the guest house door. I lay still, thinking it was one of the others using the bathroom, but the sound was the outer door, the one that opened onto the garden. I got up and looked out the window. Tom was crossing the garden in the dark, heading toward the mountain path. He had his camera. I called his name quietly through the glass. He didn't turn around. He kept walking, steady and unhurried, and the darkness took him. I waited. I sat in the chair by the window and I waited. An hour, maybe more. Then footsteps in the garden and the door opening and Tom coming back in. He walked straight past my room to his own. I heard him set his camera down. Then, nothing. In the morning, I asked him directly. I told him I'd seen him leave. He looked at me. His eyes were the same eyes I'd known for years, same color, same shape. But there was something missing from them. Some quality of recognition that I'd never had to think about before, because it had always just been there. He said, "I just went for some air." I asked about the camera. He said he'd taken some shots of the valley at night, nothing special. I asked to see them. He said the battery was dead. He spent the rest of the day sitting outside, very still, looking at the mountain. Eli pulled me aside in the afternoon. He'd noticed too. He said Tom had barely spoken at breakfast, barely eaten. He said something felt different about him. I agreed. We didn't know what to do about it, so we did nothing. That was the last real conversation I had with Eli. The next evening I went to find Eli for dinner, and his room was empty. His bag was there. His boots were by the door. His phone was on the bed. I went outside. The grandson was in the garden. I asked if he'd seen Eli. He pointed up the mountain. He had seen him go up the path about an hour earlier. I looked at Tom. Tom was sitting in his chair, facing the mountain, completely still, his hands in his lap. He wasn't watching the path. He was watching something I couldn't see. I went inside, and I found Tom's camera on his bedside table. The battery wasn't dead. I turned it on. There were 43 photographs taken between 2 and 3 in the morning, 3 nights ago. Most of them were dark. The mountain path at night, lit only by whatever moonlight filtered through the clouds, blurred, underexposed. Not much to see. But the last 8 photographs were taken inside the monastery. The gate had been locked. We had all seen it locked when we left. In the photographs, it was open. The church entrance was open too. And in the last 4 photographs taken inside the church, lit only by the candles that were somehow still burning at 2 in the morning, there was something in the far doorway. I cannot tell you what it was. I have looked at those photographs dozens of times over the past 8 months, and I still cannot tell you. It had a shape. It was not small. It was standing in the doorway with a stillness that didn't belong to anything living. And in the final photograph, the last image on the camera, it was closer. Close enough that I could see it had no face. Not a blurred face, not a face in shadow, just nothing where a face should be. I put the camera in my bag. I packed everything I owned in under 3 minutes. I walked to the guest house door. The grandson was still outside. He looked at me, at my bag, at my face, and he didn't ask any questions. He just said, "I'll get my grandfather's car." He drove me to the nearest town without speaking. At the edge of the town, just before he turned back, he stopped the car and looked at me and said, "My grandmother told you not to go at night." I said I didn't go. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he nodded, and he drove away. I reported Eli missing to the local police that morning. They searched the mountain for 4 days. They found the monastery gate standing open. They found no sign of Eli or Tom. I've been home for 8 months. I see a therapist. I sleep with the lights on. I've told this story twice, once to the police, once to Eli's parents, who deserve to hear it from me directly. I still have the camera. I haven't deleted the photographs. I've thought about it. Every week I think about it. But something stops me every time. Some instinct I can't name. Maybe I'm afraid that deleting them won't be enough. Maybe I'm afraid that whatever is in those photographs already knows I have them. If you visited somewhere ancient, a monastery, a ruin, a place that people have been warned away from for longer than anyone can remember, and something felt wrong, I want to hear about it. Leave it in the comments. I read everyone. And to Tom and Eli, wherever you are, I'm sorry I didn't stop you. I'm sorry I waited too long. I hope the monks were wrong about what's up there. I don't think they were.